Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Live Chat with James, or sorry, Primetime Live with James. I'm all different shows, so there you go. But welcome to another episode. Thank you for tuning in. I do apologize for missing you last week. I was going to be traveling out to the Lethbridge Fashion Weekend event, but unfortunately twisted my knee and did not make it out. So I hope that anyone who was in attendance had a great time. I hear that the Fashion Weekend went flawlessly, and another great event for Lethbridge to mark down in the calendar. Now, generally, we start the program with local news, and then we scoop across the country and around the globe. But tonight, because we have a special episode that we're going to be delving deep into cyber violence and the issue of gender-based violence around the globe, we are going to forego our normal news report and jump right into the topic, because we do have a lot of information to cover this evening. Now, with that said, it is the international movement. Yes, the 16 Days of Advocacy, or 16 Days of Activism, depending on where you're from. It is referred to a bit differently, but all the same at the end of the day. It is to drive home the fact that there are no excuses for violence against women and girls, as well as gender-based violence against others. This has been a problem the world over, and of course that continues to be an issue in modern day. Unfortunately, with the increased use and reliance on technology, including social media, it has become once again an ugly head that has appeared and needs to be reeled in. The other issue that's facing is that with the prevalence of online cyberstalking, cyber violence, sextortion, and other issues, this again makes it even harder at times because of the different laws around the world, as well as the ability for law enforcement to timely act and to obtain the evidence that can be digitally wiped within a short period of time. Sometimes it takes up to months, and in some cases, even years, depending on the different regions around the world when different law enforcement agencies request that common courtesy or that professional courtesy to get evidence. It is a tough nut to crack. Now, we will take a look at various points. We'll also take a look at a couple of quick videos throughout this next hour that will show the global presence of the movement and how different countries are responding and trying to raise awareness on this very, very important issue. Now, it may surprise you, but the whole movement towards the eradication of violence against women, this whole movement that starts November the 25th and goes till December the 10th every year, started in the Dominican Republic many, many decades ago. And we're going to actually take a look at the history of the movement and how it started and became a UN-sponsored project, and how so many different countries have taken part in it and are continually raising awareness about these issues. It is something that has driven more urgently with the increased use of things such as deep fakes with artificial intelligence as well. So we're going to take a look at all of these things, but this year marks a critical juncture in the global effort to combat gender-based violence. It's a fight that's anchored by the UN Women's 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. It's an essential observance running annually from, as I said, November the 25th to December the 10th. And this period is not merely symbolic. It's a global campaign demanding systematic change under the powerful theme for 2025, and that is Unite to End Digital Violence Against All Women and Girls. And we could take that even further to include boys in that as well, as there is also the sextortion and other issues when it comes to online bullying and cybersecurity that also includes men. Now, when we look at this, it is, of course, being enforced by the definitive slogan, "No excuse." And this focus explicitly acknowledges that technology meant to connect and to empower has been weaponized as a primary tool of oppression and control against women and girls worldwide. Now, the report that we're going to go through tonight is looking at the critical foundational premise established by the UN Women that digital abuse does not remain confined to the screen. It profoundly spills into real life, escalating fear and, in the worst cases, leading to physical violence and femicide. Digital violence is therefore not secondary harassment or generalized trolling. Violence online is unambiguously recognized as a real violence, carrying measurable, harmful consequences that must be addressed as a public safety crisis. The scope of this threat is immense. Global figures indicate that between 16 to 58% of women and girls globally have experienced some form of online technology-facilitated violence, or TFGBV. Now, this wide variance in statistical reporting highlights a critical issue, and that is, while the prevalence is high, the lack of consistent and legal recognition of the standardized tracking and reporting across jurisdictions leaves millions of victims unprotected and their experiences obscured by inconsistent methodology. Now, this, of course, is a major issue. As we continue, I would like to share the first video that I wanted to bring to you tonight, and that is the history behind the 16 Days of Activism, because I think that in order to understand the whole movement and what the campaign is about, we need to go back and take a look at where it started and the whole basis for it. So let's take a look at that before we move forward with the rest of the show. As I said, we will also look at some other videos throughout the show tonight to take a look at how different countries are responding. Give me just a moment and we will pull that up here. There we go. Perfect.
Faced violence, we remember the three Mirabal sisters who were brutally assassinated after they opposed Dominican dictator Rafael Trujillo and led an underground movement exposing the systemic violence of his oppressive regime. From 1930 to 1961, the Dominican Republic was a country marked by fear, corruption, and widespread human rights abuses. General Trujillo came to power in 1930 and imprisoned, tortured, and murdered thousands of people during his reign. Trujillo was also notorious for targeting young women for his own personal pleasure. In 1949, he made advances towards Minerva Mirabal at a party which she rejected. The family also left early, which the dictator saw as a sign of disrespect. After Minerva's rejection of Trujillo, her family feared that she would get involved in politics and ultimately be killed. But she pushed on, becoming the first woman to graduate from law school. Because of her rejection of Trujillo, the state did not authorize her to practice. The sisters were involved in clandestine activities against Trujillo's regime and kept their activism alive even after marriage. During the 1950s, armed revolutions against Trujillo's regime were crushed by the state. In 1959, the Mirabal sisters, along with their husbands, began an underground movement called the 14th of June movement and called themselves Las Mariposas, or the Butterflies. The sisters held secret meetings and distributed pamphlets educating the public on Trujillo's atrocities. In 1960, they brought together revolutionaries from around the country to strengthen their resistance, but Trujillo's spies were everywhere. The sisters were caught. Minerva and Maria were imprisoned, while Patria's husband and son were abducted. Their efforts gained international attention. Trujillo, afraid of losing US support internationally, released the sisters, but kept the husbands imprisoned. On November 25, 1960, as they were returning after a jail visit to their husbands, they were ambushed by Trujillo's men and beaten to death. Patria was 36, Minerva was 33, Maria was 25. Their deaths sparked outrage internationally. The US closed its embassy in the Dominican Republic, and the situation grew stark for the dictator.
The symbols of Trujillo rule are rapidly disappearing from the Caribbean nation.
And just months later, in 1961, Trujillo was assassinated by distraught members of the Dominican army. The Mirabal sisters became national heroes. Monuments were erected in their honor, and to this day, their courage became a symbol of resistance against oppression. To commemorate their sacrifice, November 25th was declared the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women in Latin America in 1980. Later, in 1999, it was recognized by the United Nations. In 1991, activists at Women's Global Leadership Institute initiated a 16-day campaign against all gender-based violence from November 25th to December 10th, International Human Rights Day. Since 1991, over 6,000 organizations from 187 countries have participated in this campaign that aims to raise awareness about violence against women and girls and draws attention to issues such as rape, domestic violence, and other forms of gender-based violence. Around the world, GBV affects millions of women and transgenders on a daily basis. In countries like Pakistan, the situation remains dire. The World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report ranks Pakistan among the worst countries for gender discrimination, placing it 142nd out of 146 nations. To counter this, Pakistan has enacted several important laws to protect women, such as the Anti-Rape Act, the Protection Against Harassment of Women at the Workplace Act, and the Domestic Violence Prevention and Protection Act. Yet still, GBV continues to be widespread. Experts emphasize the need for education and societal change to break the cycle of violence and end misogynistic practices. The 16 Days of Activism campaign is more than just a commemoration. It is a reminder that gender-based violence is a global issue that demands attention and change. Just as the Mirabal sisters' courage sparked a movement for freedom, we too can stand up for those who are suffering today. The fight for equality, justice, and human rights continues.
आपकी खबर, आपकी आवाज, voicepk.net.
And again, that is from the accredited logo on the screen there. So thank you to Voice PK for sharing that video with us to bring to our audience. It is, of course, a very important topic that we bring up tonight, and one that we see here in Canada. We also see it impacting people in the US, the UK, Australia, Japan, China, any country where there is a population of people, you're going to have this problem. And unfortunately, it is one that law enforcement has a hard time keeping up with as technology changes so rapidly. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to take a quick break here to recognize our program sponsor this evening. Again, this episode brought to you by Carry Movers Limited, Western Canada's favorite family-owned and operated local and long-distance moving company, providing local services in Metro Vancouver and, of course, long-distance moves throughout Alberta, British Columbia, and throughout Northern Canada as well. Now, as we pause to thank the local business that provides the essential safety and reliability we rely on every day, we're proud again to have Carry Movers on board with us to bring you this very important program tonight. Now, when citizens are faced with major transitions, be it a new home or relocating an office, they need reliable systems and trustworthy professionals. Carry Movers provides exactly that, offering comprehensive moving services for both residential, local moving, and commercial office relocations, including long-distance services. Their commitment to meticulous professional services, including providing complimentary freight insurance for local moves and experienced employees dedicated to protecting your belongings. Trust Carry Movers for a safe and reliable transition, a stark contrast, of course, to the insecurity plaguing the digital landscape we discussed today. You can find Carry Movers online at www.karymovers.com. That's karymovers.com. Now, back to our program here. Now, let's take a look at the definition and the forms that targets of TFGBV. And of course, it's technology-facilitated gender-based violence. And that encompasses a wide evolving spectrum of violent behaviors designed to control, intimidate, and ultimately silence women and girls. These tactics include relentless online harassment and cyberstalking, doxing, which is the publishing of private personal information to intimidate or endanger an individual. Now, there's also digital dating abuse intended to control or isolate a partner, create identity theft, and of course, the creation of fake profiles, not to mention the other issues related to the dating scams that are out there. Now, the evidence reveals that TFGBV functions as a systematic mechanism of political and professional disenfranchisement. It is a targeted tool used to suppress public voices and restrict democratic participation. The disproportionate rates of abuse directed at women in positions of power and visibly, this demonstrates the intent. For example, a report from UNESCO found that 73% of women journalists have experienced online violence in the course of their work. Similarly, a survey concerning the Asia-Pacific region indicated that 60% of women parliamentarians have faced online gender-based violence. Now, this high-level targeting suggests that digital violence is employed specifically to censor public discourse. If influential women cannot speak safely, if the digital public square is weaponized against them for possessing a platform, their voices are effectively silenced, which consequently undermines both gender equality and the principles of a robust democracy. Now, this failure of the legal system to vigorously prosecute this specific form of violence constitutes a failure to uphold fundamental human rights to expression and participation. Now, of course, the resulting harm extends way beyond the psychological distress. The consequences are tangible and severe, including chronic mental health crises such as anxiety, depression, sleep disorders, and post-traumatic stress. Victims often withdraw from public life, restrict their online presence, and abandon educational opportunities or suffer significant financial damage. These are real, tangible impacts of this issue. Now, of course, we also, as I mentioned earlier, the new frontier, and that is the AI-facilitated violence. Now, the crisis of digital violence is escalating dramatically due to the rapid advancements in artificial intelligence. AI tools are not simply facilitating existing abuse. They're actively creating new, more complex, and psychologically devastating forms of harm. Experts characterize this as a perfect storm where powerful AI tools, often trained on existing societal gender biases, enable violence to spread further, faster, and with heightened complexity. The most disturbing manifestation is on the rise, what's known as IBA, or image-based abuse, and that's the use of deepfakes. Now, AI-generated deepfakes involve the creation of hyper-realistic, non-consensual sexual content by digitally manipulating or superimposing images or videos onto a victim. Research confirms that the targeted nature of this abuse, 90 to 95% of all deepfakes currently available online are non-consensual pornographic images, and approximately 90% of them depict women. This is used for sophisticated sextortion, blackmail, and harassment, leading to profound professional, financial, and psychological harm. Once disseminated, these fabricated images can be infinitely replicated and stored, making removal nearly impossible. Some of these individuals who are creating these for the sextortion and other reasons actually will send them out to employers, send them out to the person's contacts on their Facebook or their other social media feeds. They'll send it out to their family members, including their children. Imagine that, these videos that have been faked and manipulated, and then they get sent out to people who don't understand that they are only AI images, but still the irreparable harm that this causes, it cannot be understated. Now, the legal inadequacy in addressing this specific threat is a major factor in the resulting perpetrator impunity. Traditional laws require evidence of a real image or a real event to prosecute. AI bypasses this requirement by creating a hyper-realistic yet fictitious harm, thereby leaving a massive legal enforcement gap. This lack of explicit legal recognition for AI-generated abuse means that current legislation is often obsolete before it is even enforced, enabling immediate impunity for the worst forms of digital sexual violence. Compounding this issue is a sign of structural gender bias. Experts note that many of the deepfake tools developed by male teams are not even designed to function effectively when targeting images of men's bodies. This technological disparity inherently focuses the weaponization of the technology overwhelmingly on women, a form of systemic design flaw that perpetuates gender inequality. Now, we are going to take a look at keyboard coercion and the escalation of violence, but first we'll play another one of our quick little videos that we're going to be checking out throughout the evening from around the world so that you can see how different countries are working towards this activism campaign and to promote an end to this type of violence.
We all deserve to feel safe, both on and offline. But every day, young men and boys are targeted and harmed by online content designed to breed resentment, isolation, and false ideas of success. And it's changing how they interact with the women and girls in their lives. In Australia, 1 in 3 women have experienced sexual or image-based abuse. And 1 in 4 girls feel unsafe at school because of the actions of boys in their classes influenced by the manosphere. These networks are harming us all. It's time we talk about it. This 16 Days of Activism, join us in changing the conversation about the manosphere.
And we'll watch another quick one before we return to our report here.
The Gender-Based Violence Unit is leading the annual 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence under the theme, Let We Unite, No to Violence Against We Women and Girls. The November 25th to December 10th observance is a global campaign to advocate against all forms of gender-based violence and garner support for survivors. Katanga Roberts, a social worker attached to the Ministry of Social Development and Gender Affairs, says gender-based violence is a public health and human rights issue.
The 16 Days campaign reminds us that gender-based violence is not a private issue. It's a national and global public health and human rights issue. Our aim is to raise awareness, strengthen community support, and ensure survivors have access to justice and services.
This year's drive aims to spark open conversations, educate the public, and encourage prevention through an interactive program called Voice of the People, Community Conversations on Gender-Based Violence.
As part of this year's observance, the Gender-Based Violence Unit within the ministry will be airing Voice of the People, Community Conversations on Gender-Based Violence. The program will be aired November 25th, November 27th, as well as December 2nd and December 4th, between 5 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. It will be aired across various platforms, including JESS and the ministry's Facebook page.
The program features commentary from influencers, educators, and other concerned citizens. The public is encouraged to tune in and join the collective effort to end gender-based violence.
These community conversations bring real experiences and concerns from the public. We encourage everyone to tune in to our upcoming broadcasts and be part of the change. Ending gender-based violence requires all of us.
Reporting for GBN News, I am Deidre Seeley.
So again, thank you to GBN News for that little report there. As I said, I think it's important that we look at these small little snippets so you can see how wide-based the issue is, and that there are organizations around the globe in almost every country that are participating in this program this year. So again, I just felt that it was very important that we take a look at some of those, and we'll look at more of them throughout throughout the show as well. And that'll include from Scotland, from Canada, and other places, as well as what's being done by certain communities to help tackle the problem of gender-based violence. We know that this is a global issue that's going to need global resources and global solutions. But let's take a look at the most urgent dimension of technology-facilitated violence, and that's the transition from online psychological manipulation to the physical violence, assault, and femicide. Now, activists rightly argue that the online-offline divide is a structural illusion, as digital acts are consistently integrated into a single continuum of coercive control. Now, when we talk about coercive control, we're talking cyberstalking and persistent digital abuse that are now recognized as integral components of domestic violence and coercive control. Technology provides the perpetrators with the powerful new mediums to enact control, ensuring that the abuse becomes spaceless violence that can infiltrate every sphere of a victim's life. Digital tools that facilitate every element described in the criminological model of the power and control wheel. So you're looking at isolation, where perpetrators use technology to monitor contacts, limit outside involvement, and track the victim's locations or activities. Intimidation. Now, digital forms include doxing, digital mobbing, or the circulation of image-based abuse, which serves as remote but constant threat of public humiliation and psychological violence. And then we turn to coercion and threats directly, that this is often executed through sextortion, which is threatening to share intimate images unless demands are met, or by threatening harm to children or pets or other family members, extending the digital threat to the family and the victim's immediate physical world. Once again, a huge, huge issue. And the erosion of online-offline boundary means that the abuse is relentless, making the victim perpetually vulnerable regardless of their physical location. And that, again, creates a major psychological trauma on the victim. Now, when we look at the cyberstalking as a lethal risk indicator, of course, we know that online aggression and violence are viewed by public health experts as significant public health threats, comparable in risk to many other serious factors. When digital violence includes stalking, the risk transitions into the realm of documented lethal danger, particularly within the intimate partner relationships. Now, the data connecting stalking behaviors, which now heavily feature digital elements to homicide, is definitive. Stalking, both online and offline, increases the risk of intimate partner homicide by a factor of 3 times. Now, the link is further solidified by the high prevalence found in femicide cases among female victims of attempted and completed intimate partner homicide. 85% of attempted and 76% of completed homicide victims were stalked in the 12 months prior to their attack. This confirms that stalking is a highly reliable indicator that is intrinsically linked to escalating and often fatal violence. Furthermore, intimate partner stalkers exhibit a high rate of follow-through on any such threats. Now, when we look at that, of course, one study documented that 71% of intimate partner victims who were threatened were subsequently assaulted. This statistic underscores why law enforcement must treat every threat made by an intimate partner stalker with the highest level of urgency, viewing the threat itself as evidence of a potential assault. Now, the determination of risk must also consider the tactics used, the sheer diversity of stalking behavior. The use of multiple intrusion methods such as tracking, impersonation, doxing, and general threats is strongly predictive of the overall negative impact on the victim. A perpetrator employing a wide arsenal of digital tactics demonstrates a higher, more obsessive level of control, which criminologically studied has confirmed that it correlates directly with a greater subsequent risk of physical harm. Now, let's take a look at this lethal pathway and the stalking and image partner homicide. So again, we'll look at the statistic, the finding, and the significance, just to reiterate this. Now, the homicide risk increase. The finding was that stalking increases the risk of intimate partner homicide by 3 times, and the significance is that stalking is a critical indicator of lethal intent and must be prioritized by the justice system. Pre-homicide stalking rates, okay, that's the statistic here, is 85% of attempted and 76% of completed homicide victims were stalked in the 12 months prior to attack. This confirms that cyberstalking and stalking is deeply integrated into the pattern of escalating violence. Now, the assault follow threat. Okay, that means that 71% of intimate partner stalking victims who were threatened were subsequently assaulted. Now, highlights that the high follow-through rate for threats made by intimate partner stalkers, proving that the threats must be taken seriously. When we look at the psychological impacts and the psychology of the escalation and the reacting to loss of power, this is another issue that comes up and drives the furtherance of the potential violence to go from online to the offline and in real life, as they say, or some people call it from URL to IRL. Now, the transition from digital control to physical violence is primarily driven by the perpetrator's reaction to a perceived loss of dominance. Abusers rely on total control, facilitated by psychological manipulation and digital anonymity. Now, when the victim disrupts this control by leaving the relationship, blocking communication, reporting the abuse, or challenging the narrative, the perpetrator experiences a profound loss of power and access. This loss is a significant predictor of lethal risk. The length of time a woman was out of a violent relationship was found to be the strongest predicator of increased post-separation stalking. This confirms that the critical period of escalation is not during the abuse, but when the victim seeks freedom and challenges the perpetrator's authority. When digital surveillance and psychological control fail to enforce compliance, the perpetrator often resorts to the defense strategy known as denial, attack, and reverse victim and offender, or DARVO. Now, the abuser attempts to regain control by making the victim doubt their perception, or what's known as gaslighting, or by shifting responsibility, claiming that the victim is the true abuser. This tactic is used to justify the abuse and prevent the victim from speaking out. Now, if these psychological and manipulative defenses fail to silence the victim and reassert dominance, the perpetrator's desperation reaches a peak. The collapse of the digital control structure, the loss of anonymity, the threat of exposure, or the physical distance of the victim becomes a trigger for the final, most dangerous phase. And the escalation to physical intimidation, assault, or homicide is a last resort effort to enforce compliance and regain absolute tangible dominance when digital coercive control is challenged or neutralized. Recognizing that this desperation for lost power is the key driver of physical escalation, and it's paramount for risk management and victim protection efforts. Now, as we move along, there's the global accountability vacuum, and that's where governments and international institutions are consistently failing to establish a cohesive and impactful legal framework capable of addressing cross-border digital attacks. This results in a global accountability vacuum where perpetrators act with impunity. A big issue globally. So let's take a look at another quick video before we move on to the failure of cross-border enforcement. And as you can see, this here is more text-based, just an introduction that the UN Women put out to give a generalized announcement. And this comes all the way from Sarajevo, where it was officially launched for this year's event. I think it's also important for us to realize the targeting of youth in this campaign as well, to be inclusive, to really try to curb it before it begins, and to not only empower younger women and girls, but also to educate males on this important issue and how not to behave and now not to conduct themselves in the cyber world or the real world. So again, I think that this goes a long way to moving that narrative forward. And as we do, we'll take a look at one more quick video before we get back to our regular program here.
Today, we'd like to draw your attention to the significance of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. It's a global campaign that unites people from all corners of the world to end violence against women and girls.
Gender-based violence remains one of the most systemic and widespread human rights violations of our time, with 1 in 3 women experiencing abuse in their lifetime. Urgent action is needed.
So we urge you to join us in the fight against gender-based violence, share your stories, support organisations working tirelessly in this field, and stand up for the rights of every individual, regardless of their gender.
Let us remember the words of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Let's ensure that these words become a living reality for all.
So join us on this crucial journey. Together, we can create a world free from gender-based violence.
So once again, as you can see, that was the UK embassy based in Hungary, in Budapest. So it shows that it is such a global sharing of this whole cause and the goal to reduce that violence. Now, as we continue on, we're going to take a look at the failure of cross-border enforcement and why that is. And the digital nature of the TFGBV allows perpetrators to easily operate across jurisdictions, compounding the anonymity and the speed of abuse. Excuse me. For a local police investigation in a region such as Lethbridge here in Alberta, prosecuting a transnational attack is incredibly difficult due to the legal challenge of extraterritoriality. Now, the fundamental problem is that electronic evidence, the IP logs, the communication data, and the identity of the user is decoupled from the physical location of the victim and the crime. Now, investigators face a formidable challenge in obtaining the evidence, which is typically stored by major multinational service providers on servers across the globe. Not only is the volume of data immense, but the critical information such as IP address retention logs is highly time sensitive. If data retrieval is delayed, key evidence can be permanently lost or deleted, thereby preventing prosecution. Effective accountability requires rapid mechanisms for evidence sharing and cross-border cooperation. Now, we have had a system that's called the MLAT, and that creates a bottleneck, and it's a dominant failure mechanism, basically. Now, the standard international procedure for obtaining evidence from a foreign jurisdiction is the use of the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty. Now, these treaties govern government-to-government requests for crime-related information held by entities within another state's jurisdiction. However, the MLAT regime is a 20th century instrument attempting to manage a 21st century digital flow, rendering it structurally obsolete for cybercrime cases. Now, the MLAT process is characterized by agonizing delays. Requests are often slow, opaque, and routinely measured in months, and in some cases, as I said earlier, years. Now, this time lag is fatal for cybercrime investigations, as data retention policies often purge critical data, sometimes within weeks. Now, the MLAT bottleneck thus functions as an impunity generator. The systemic inefficiency inherent in the process ensures that perpetrators acting across borders evade prosecution simply because there is the evidence that expires while the request is being processed. Now, the structural inability of sovereign judicial systems to protect citizens from transnational digital harm forces law enforcement into the impossible situation and compromising the timely pursuit of justice for those survivors. Now, it's a patchwork of competing legal systems as well. The global legal environment for TFGBV is fragmented, lacking the standardization necessary for cohesive enforcement. The lack of global consensus on the criminalization of specific conduct and the absence of clear procedural guarantees means that the perpetrators easily exploit jurisdictions with weak or non-existent laws. Currently, nearly half of the world's women and children and women and girls specifically lack explicit legal protection from digital abuse. Now, while global frameworks struggle, regional bodies have acted to modernize definitions. The Council of Europe's Istanbul Convention and the Organization of American States, the Balam-do-Para Convention, and I probably mispronounced that, my apologies, but they've both been interpreted or adapted to explicitly address technology-facilitated violence against women and girls. In an attempt to bypass the glacial pace of the MLATs, powerful states have developed accelerated frameworks. These include the US Cloud Act and the EU e-evidence regulation. Now, these mechanisms aim to streamline data access for investigators into serious crime and terrorism. However, a key risk emerges here. The focus of these new streamlined cross-border agreements is often aligned with state security interests, i.e. terrorism and organized crime, not gender-based violence. Now, if the TFGBV is not explicitly prioritized within these agreements, the vast majority of digital violence cases will continue to fall back into the slow, ineffective MLAT. That queue, again, can be very, very time-consuming and really ineffective in any type of evidence gathering. Now, the regulatory misalignment perpetuates a two-tiered justice system. Effective and efficient justice for national security interests, but compromised or non-existent justice for gender-based violence survivors. Now, as we look at that, of course, we can, summarize that. And in doing so, we'll take a look. Okay, so the barrier or the mechanism that we're talking about is the MLATs. It's extremely slow, and its process can be measured in months, if not years. The legal and human rights impact of it is the critical digital evidence is lost, resulting in case dismissals and perpetrator impunity. Data jurisdiction and fragmentation is another barrier or mechanism, and that challenge is that the data is held globally by US or EU-based providers on servers worldwide. What is the human rights impact and the legal impact? Well, local police lack the jurisdiction to compel data production, leading to legal paralysis in the transnational cases. Now, when we look at the barrier as the lack of legal harmonization, again, we look at the challenge, and that is nearly half of women in the world lack explicit legal protection from digital abuse. Diverse definitions of cybercrime are failing, or they are non-existent in some regions, many regions. And, those that do have them, in the other 50%, some of them lack any type of consistency or enforcement, and that can be due to police resources and availability or for other reasons. Perpetrators exploit those jurisdictions with weak, absent laws and ensuring that cross-border impunity. So again, huge, huge human rights and legal impacts. Now, the new mechanisms, as I said, the cloud and the e-evidence, while faster, they raise concerns over balancing state access with privacy and due process protections. Again, something that we can't overlook, but at the same time, it is causing a problem when it comes to holding people accountable and to prosecute them. And the risk that the speed and efficiency are prioritized over robust human rights frameworks and victim-centered justice. So again, huge, huge concerns there. Now, when we look at this, it's a path to digital safety and accountability that is essential. The path forward requires immediate legislation action and combining that with systemic cultural and technology reform. The no excuse imperative demands that technology's complexity must no longer serve as a legal shield for those perpetrators. Now, before we take a look at another video, folks, I just wanted to once again announce and acknowledge our sponsor, Carry Movers Limited. Now, today's analysis reveals the global systems often fail to deliver reliability and safety. In stark contrast, when you require dependable service, you turn to professionals. Carry Movers Limited is dedicated to providing that reliability in your personal life and business operations. They offer excellent office relocation services, equipped with experienced employees, proper padding, and dollies to accommodate any size office. They ensure all items are labeled correctly and distributed to the assigned areas and will be disassembled and reassembled for office furniture and such upon request. When integrity, professionalism, and reliability matter most, trust the experts at Carry Movers Limited. Find them at www.karymovers.com. That's karymovers.com. Now, let's take a look at another quick video before we start looking at the different policy demands and accountability for governments and for the platforms that are hosting such technology and systematic failure when it comes to protecting women and girls from online cyber violence and gender-based violence.
From November 25th to December 10th, we mark the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. This campaign brings together people in Canada and around the world to call out and speak up against gender-based violence. Maintenant et plus que jamais, nous voyons les conséquences tragiques de la violence fondée sur le sexe. The women and children that are disproportionately impacted in conflict zones around the world. The fatal instances of intimate partner violence here in Canada et la violence envers les femmes et les filles autochtones. These images and stories are horrifying, and they remind us of how much more work needs to be done to address this issue. This is why we launched the National Action Plan to end gender-based violence, alongside provinces and territories. Et nous allons continuer d'agir pour prévenir la violence. But we know that programs and policies can only go so far, which is why we need Canadians from every walk of life to embody this year's theme. Listen, learn, act. Listen to survivors who share their experiences and to the people working on the front lines. Learn what gender-based violence is, how to spot it, and what you can do to prevent it. Act by taking this information and applying it to your daily lives. Ce n'est pas juste un problème qui touche les femmes, c'est un problème de société. This isn't just a women's issue. This is a societal issue that we need to face together to build the safe and inclusive country that we all deserve. Thank you. Merci.
So again, as I said, it's just coming from around the world, and I was happy to see Canada being very active online and getting that message out as well. And of course, it's countries around the world. As we say that, it's also an important way to look at the Unite call to action, and that's directed equally at governments, the tech industry, and the public. So there's all different levels must come together and find solutions that can be sustainable long term. Now, the legislative and enforcement requirements for government are, when you look at governments that must move beyond legal adaptation to legislative adoption. States must immediately adopt or amend their criminal and civil laws to explicitly prohibit and criminalize all forms of online violence against women, specifically non-consensual distribution of intimate images, doxing, and online harassment and stalking. Now, to counter the MLAT failure, cross-border evidence sharing protocols must be overhauled to prioritize speed and victim protection. With that stated, we also need to be clear when we talk about the importance of bringing in the AI the regulations and protections as well. Because as quick as the technology is changing, the laws are not keeping up with it. So that's an important one to look at. We know that many regional police force, and states, provinces, and so forth in various nations are bringing forward different consenting laws, whereas if an individual is spreading pictures of someone of a compromised nature, we'll put it politely that way, then there are laws that are being brought in to protect them. But again, those are for actual videos or images that were created and not ones that were manipulated through AI. So again, very important to include that in the current regulations and laws. When it comes to the tech industry accountability, of course, they must be held accountable for facilitating environments where violence is amplified, because studies confirm a lack of accountability from platforms and social networking sites relying on voluntary codes of conduct is insufficient. Legislative action must impose external mandates on these tech companies to shift their operational priority from maximizing engagement to maximizing user safety. This requires companies to establish mandatory transparency standards on digital violence, rigorously enforce codes of conduct, and proactively remove harmful content. Also, they need to publish transparent, auditable reports on content moderation effectiveness. Huge issues. Now, as we look as well at closing the AI legal gap, we have the Five Eyes mandate. The proliferation of deepfakes requires governments to modernize their legal definitions of harm. International legal consensus is necessary to standardize the scope of online abuse material, ensuring that it includes realistic, AI-generated, or manipulated content. Nations like Canada, part of the Five Eyes Alliance, must address specific legal gaps that currently permit perpetrators to create hyper-realistic abuse with legal impunity. Research has flagged that certain jurisdictions, such as the UK, currently have legislative silence regarding criminalization of indecent pseudo-photographs that include fictitious children. Lawmakers must act to explicitly and unequivocally criminalize all acts related to the AI-generated abuse and manipulation. Now, if TFGBV is treated as a secondary crime, the technological complexity of AI will ensure that the current failure of accountability is only amplified. When we look at the primary prevention and the cultural shift, folks, the prosecution is a reactive measure. For deep societal change, primary prevention is mandatory, challenging the culture normalization of violence, often amplified in online manosphere spaces. This requires significant investment in promoting digital citizenship, embedding the ethical use of digital tools in school curricula, and also sensitizing young people, especially young men and boys, about responsible online behavior. Addressing TFGBV ultimately requires challenging the underlying ideological causes and gender inequality, not just the technological symptoms. When we look at the no excuse imperative, folks, technology-facilitated gender-based violence is a global human rights crisis sustained by systematic governance failure and technological complexity. The legal system must overcome the crippling inefficiency of the MLAT structure. They need to close up the jurisdictional gaps and impose external accountability mandates on the technology sector. The UN Women's Campaign serves as a demand for survivor-centered justice, ensuring that legislative action and support services prioritize the safety, dignity, and confidentiality of the victims. The legal system must immediately stop treating technological complexity or cross-border issues as an excuse for inaction. Digital violence is real violence, and the international community has the duty and the means to enforce safety. There is no excuse for continued failure. With that said, folks, that is the end of our report here. So we'll close off with a couple of more videos. And then if you would like to call into the show, folks, the studio lines are open right now at 604-385-5093. Feel free to give us a call and have your say. And let's take a look at a few more videos, including one that I really like about, goes a bit more in depth about how certain jurisdictions are using first responders as a way to reach out and curb gender-based violence and violence against women and girls. Injuries, psychological trauma, and many other things. Different violence can take many forms, and that's intimate partner violence. They can be psychological, physical, or sexual in the ways in which it is manifested or physically comes through. And you've got to enhance the safety of all different ways, and part of that is educating men and boys as well on better ways to handle themselves responsibly online. 1 in 3 women worldwide has experienced physical and or sexual violence, most at the hands of an intimate partner. Again, this is according to the World Health Organization and is a really telling number and statistic when you look at the reality of it. For all of those who are out there and researching this topic, of course, we'll have a bunch of different resources available on the truecrimeandjusticetv.com website, as it is perfectly within that wheelhouse of crime and violence. So we'll have that there as well. Once again, truecrimeandjusticetv.com. You can find free streaming resources there as well on the movement this year from different organizations, documentaries from previous years, and such. So again, just really try to educate yourself and others. Make sure that when you find resources online that you think are of interest and very helpful, then make sure that you share them and hashtag no excuse. If you are a male or female online and you see somebody that you feel is being a bully or are participating in activities that could be recognized as gender-based violence or violence of any sort, hashtag no excuse and point it out to them. Make sure that you call it out. Don't just ignore it and hope that somebody else will step up, because again, without all of us coming together with one singular voice, it makes it much harder to curb the problem. There are many different ways that we look at different violence that is not only between relationships, but also when it comes to medical and other practices, religious practices and such worldwide as well, where we need the global community to stand up and to take action. There are certain practices that are definitely being looked at by organizations such as Doctors Without Borders and the United Nations, the Red Cross, and many other organizations to help support victims and to raise awareness and education to stop different types of systemic failures that result in violence against women and children. We also need to remember that in different war zones and different disaster zones, whether that's natural disasters or man-made disasters, there is a certain level of vulnerability to the victims of these events, and therefore they are also open to more abuse and more vulnerable to the perpetrators of different types of abuse, exploitation, and of course violence. So again, something to keep in mind, that there are many different ways in which women, children, and men and boys as well can be manipulated or abused in these different sectors. So again, it's all about raising awareness, education, and for people to stand up and support the victims and to speak out loud and to find different ways that can be utilized to curb the impacts of violence by prevention. and preventing them from happening in the first place.
Our collective outrage must translate into action.
I will always be committed to a future where women and girls and LGBTQ people can live and work knowing that they are safe.
SHRM partners with the ILO to see that organizations have the tools and resources they need to safeguard employees and promote healthy workplace cultures.
We must continue this important work and create workspaces that are free from violence and harassment.
I am hungry for change. We need to come together collectively to stop gender-based violence now.
We look forward to supporting additional efforts in partnership with unions, civil society, businesses, multilateral partners such as the International Labor Organization, and all of you to ensure everyone in the world enjoys safe and respectful workplaces.
So again, as you can see, it is a global effort to try and curb gender-based violence. Do your part, get involved, educate yourself so you can also pass that education on to others. You've been watching a special episode of Primetime Live here on JESS FM and JESS TV from Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada. I am your host, James Cousineau, inviting you to be coming back next week when we'll be taking a look at the updated information as it comes pertinent to Russia and Ukraine and the war there, as well as peace talks. We'll also take a look at how the potential of the current peace agreement or the proposed peace agreement is selling out Ukraine. We'll explore that next week, and we will take a look at some of the video and footage that or images that I captured when I was in Ukraine covering the war several years ago. So again, we'll look forward to seeing you for that episode as well. For the meantime, folks, please feel free to like, follow, and subscribe. Also, make sure that you share this video with others so we can educate the masses. You can also leave your comments below this video, and we will read them and review and respond to them accordingly. Once again, this is James Cousineau coming to you from JESS FM and JESS TV, Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week, 8 o'clock Mountain Standard Time.
Just calm yourself down.